Go do the thing that you want to do that's a hobby or completely outside of work that has nothing to do with your professional experience.
There's always a chance to sort of reinvent and repurpose yourself, if you will. And I think that's incredible. You can't really count yourself out if a bachelor's degree or master's degree is not in your future.
Welcome to Beyond Bosch. I'm your host, Jessica Dahl. And if you are a person or a parent of a person exploring the path of STEM education and careers, this episode is for you. Be sure to subscribe and also review this episode as you're listening so we can get your feedback and you don't miss another episode. So joining us today on the podcast, we have Kathleen Bushnell Owsley and James Abraham. Kathleen is the executive of the Corporate Foundation for North America, the Bosch Community Fund. And prior to Bosch, she served as project manager for Detroit National Community Development Team at the Kresge Foundation. She was also executive director of the 1D initiative led by Edsel B. Ford II, and served as VP Market Development with the Detroit Regional Chamber. Interesting fact about Kat, she received her master's degree in Irish Studies from Queen's University in Belfast. We also have James Abraham. He's joining us as a master's student in mechanical engineering from University of Michigan with a focus on energy engineering. Say that 5 times fast. And he's also a graduate intern in the Bosch Powertrain Solution Division. In this role, James is working on reducing emissions using various thermal management strategies as the Bosch Sustainability Fellow. So after all of that, let's dive right in. First of all, thank you, Kat and James, so much for being here. So why are the both of you on this episode together? What's the connection here?
Well, really early in my tenure at Bosch, one of the first organizations we spoke to in 2012 was the University of Michigan College of Engineering. And the vision was to form a partnership that would result in fellowships annually to support students that were pursuing not only engineering, but engineering with sustainability weaved in through there, right? So this has been the ethos of Bosch, for so long. And annually, we have these extraordinary human beings that are awarded a fellowship through this program. And James and I just kind of hit it off and wanted to be able to share his journey, particularly, as you said, with parents, students, and associates, because it's so unique.
That's wonderful. So, James, how did you even become aware of this opportunity and how did you get interested in it?
Yeah, so initially it was just an email that came in that first introduced me to the position. Honestly, I haven't really heard of Bosch or the fellowship at all before that. Started to look into it a little bit more, researched the company. One thing that kind of stuck out was Bosch's commitment to being carbon neutral. Not a lot of companies walk the walk, and it seemed like Bosch was actually doing that, which was really exciting. Specifically with the fellowship, though, the thing that I liked most about it, based on I guess the flyer that was associated with the fellowship, the details of the fellowship, was that it seemed like sustainability was kind of the foundation or the end goal, and STEM was the tool used to reach that goal. That was something that I really subscribe to and kind of identify with as just the skills that I've learned throughout my studies as being the tools that I can apply to sustainability, which is why I think it's working out so well so far. Hopefully, Kat agrees, but...
Yeah, I think that's why you're here today. So I think that sounds interesting that it kind of fell in your lap. But I love that you were so intrigued by the presentation of sustainability. And like Kat was saying, the ethos of Bosch, it came through to you is very, very important, I think. And Kat, what is the value of helping people like James, other students, teachers, really anyone who's interested in STEM? Why is that so important and growing even more important today?
So one, we take a look at it from the full continuum, right? So there's opportunities where particularly we really just want to get students interested, not necessarily in STEM or eco-STEM, but rather we know that those are those things, but we don't want that to feel like a barrier, right? So project-based learning, place-based learning, hands-on stuff that actually is STEM. That's what we feel like we want to do at the early levels. And then as we start to progress along the, sort of the continuum for students is keep that momentum going and that interest and that confidence going. And that could then turn into not only educational paths, but career paths as well. And it's so important then at the output end, because so many of the jobs that are going to be available are going to be in this area. And then I think is just the magic around the U of M Sustainability Fellowship in particular is that not only are those jobs going to be available, but it's going to be imperative that we have people who not only can do these types of solutions-based work, because the problems we have, and we say wicked problems in philanthropy, these wicked problems of climate change and carbon emissions, those things need to be addressed. And so to have somebody who's experienced and interested is going to be 100% imperative for society. So we really try to go, like I said, soup to nuts, getting kids really interested and breaking down those barriers early. But then also at the level that James is at, being able to honor that and shine a light on people like James and support him in his work and path as he goes forward.
I love that.
Just to bounce off that too, you mentioned keeping it hands-on. I think that's so crucial from a young age, and even into high school and now even as what I'm doing. Just having that hands-on experience is really, I don't know, it connects a lot of equations you might learn or formulas and kind of the nitty-gritty or technical content that you learn in a classroom and really experience it in real life. I know for me that's what stuck with STEM and specifically engineering is that kind of hands-on, tangible. I could actually feel what I'm doing and what I'm learning in the classroom, which is just, in my opinion, so important to actually keeping kids not only engaged in STEM initially, but wanting to pursue it and having the drive to pursue it in the future as well.
Absolutely. So James, to your point, what kind of got you down this path of STEM or engineering? I mean, you didn't know about Bosch years ago. Are there any experiences, people, classes that kind of got you going down that path?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird mix of things, honestly. So in undergraduate, I was involved with research for 3 years. So I was actually doing something completely different. I was involved in a biomechanics lab. We were studying the mechanical properties of tendons. So in that class, I was studying anything from horse tendons, cow tendons, mouse tendons, all this different crazy stuff. It was incredibly interesting. It was something that I really enjoyed. Like I was saying before, it kind of got that hands-on, tangible experience of, okay, I'm learning about an elastic modulus or something like that in the classroom, and here's how it's actually being applied to the real world. At that same time, I'm an avid runner. I run quite a bit. I love being outdoors and in nature. And that's something that I haven't really experienced too much or wasn't really connected with a ton. So as I was coming up to junior year, I started taking some classes in renewable energy systems, specifically a technology called concentrated solar power, which is kind of my primary interest. And I kind of realized, hey, I can connect all these tools that I'm learning in this biomechanics lab, the kind of those STEM hands-on skills. Maybe it's not necessarily applied to sustainability, but there's still tools and skills. And I can apply those to this thing that I really enjoy, sustainability, that I'm learning through being outdoors and being in nature and realizing how important just the earth is in general. So yeah, a little bit of a unique introduction to sustainability and interest in sustainability, but that's kind of how I found it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that those listening, I mean, even if you're just at the student level or beyond that, or looking at changing a career, or you're a parent to a student or a grandparent, whoever, I think we all know it's not a straight line, right? Life is one big journey. Just when you think you're about to arrive, there's a fork in the road. Could you both tell me a little bit about maybe something like that that's happened to you in your career? Kat, you've had quite a bit of experience at different levels and really cool stuff. And James, you've already just shared a bit about how you've shifted your mindset. Do you have any stories that would inspire those who are maybe hitting a fork in that road or questioning their path?
I could speak to that off the bat initially, just because I was just talking about it with a transition from biomechanics to sustainability focused work and just energy in general. It only happened a couple of years ago. So I'm 23. This happened when I was like 20. So it's only 3 years or something like that. So it's pretty fresh still. It was a really scary transition going into a completely new field during the end or middle of junior year when some of my friends were starting to get jobs and they were looking at these big internships in these fancy companies and all that stuff. And here I was moving myself out of one field and putting myself into another. This is also with the context of my dad's a doctor, and it wasn't expected at all, obviously, but medicine was something that was always important to me, thought I was interested in. So there's that aspect as well. I think the biggest thing that I kept reminding myself of in that transition was just thinking about what, it sounds so cheesy, but like what's inspiring to me. When I was studying these renewable energy courses and getting really involved in just thermal sciences in general, I kind of had the background of, okay, this work may be hard, but it's going to actually be contributing to something I really care about, which is the environment and the world and nature. And that connection is really what drives the point home that the transition, although scary, is important. And I think it's going to be worthwhile in the end, even if it's a little tough at the time. The following up there is that it worked out, which is great. Like I'm still very young in my career, but it's working. Just kind of a testament to when everyone says you should do the thing that scares you or follow your passion, as cheesy as that may be, it does work.
I always like this saying that I heard from a guy, some listeners may know, Lou Glazer, who runs Michigan Future. He said this a long time ago, and it wasn't to me personally. I think it was in a speech, but it just resonated that people now will not go up a vertical ladder, right? It's going to be rock climbing rather. So you might go a little bit that way to be able to get to the top. And that might happen several times. And I loved that because certainly James is showing an example of that, I think, early in his career. I think we're seeing that even more now after COVID with people in the midst of their careers. And then even on the end, the tail end, there's so many people out there that I've been talking to who are doing this really fascinating chapter 2, at the end of a long career in something completely different. So there's always a chance to sort of reinvent and repurpose yourself, if you will. And I think that's incredible. I think that's a really cool part of where we're all at right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like remote work and all that flexibility has been definitely one of the silver linings in a crazy time. One, it gives you the time, like James, for you to go running. Maybe you didn't have that before. And then 2, really to have time to ponder and think about what is important. It puts things into perspective. And yeah, I'm with you. I took like 8 years to get through college because I did not want to commit. And I was working the full time. I was going to school part-time. I was like, do I really want to do this? I couldn't figure it out. So I hear you. My friends were like in jobs, doing all this stuff. And I loved my path. I had so much enriching experience from that. And no, I wasn't making tons of money during that time. And it almost was better because you don't look at it that way. You're looking at, hey, I want to try this thing, or I want to go on this adventure, and I don't have all of this weighing me down. So I think that's really cool that you saw that at your age and in that time of pressure too, in junior year. Like that's a lot of pressure to just finish up. I hope that inspires those who are listening to just keep challenging yourself. What's motivating you? What's your why? You're here for a reason to make a difference, even if we choose that one small thing, right?
I think the other thing too about this that's so fascinating, Jessica, is there's this sort of false construct of the speed in which you arrive there, right? Mm-hmm. And you probably have heard it from other students or other parents, but it is a false construct, meaning it can take you 8 years and that is 100% okay. Or you can in your junior year decide to do something different. The reality is I cashed out my 401k at the American Medical Association, went backpacking in Ireland, and then went over for graduate school. And I didn't end up staying in the Irish studies field, but I went back to nonprofit feeling a lot more confident and actually having great reading comprehension as a result of my master's degree. But the point is, you don't have to feel like you're rushing to get to that next piece. Like life's a journey, so take it as you need to take it. And that's the one thing I would love for students to not feel that pressure. Right. But I think we do that a lot to ourselves and to students.
Yeah, absolutely. On that point, do you have any recommendations for someone who maybe is sitting there listening to this and saying, man, I have always kind of thought about getting into something else, but where do I start? Do you have anything that would help them take that next step?
Specific to energy. So I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and one place that I learned a lot initially is called Energy Gang. It's pretty general, so it's not like you're getting into super technical content or anything, but just to learn more about the industry in general. And this was like at the very beginning stages when I started to get interested in it. That was something that helped with my transition and further interest in the field.
Yeah. Yeah, just kind of diving in, learning more, right? There's so many options out there now. There's so many free resources. You can literally go to the library if you want to. I mean, the other day, I honestly went to the library and I was like, I just need a break from technology for a minute. I don't want to look it up online. And I just talked to the actual librarian, believe it or not. I was like, can you just tell me your recommendations based on the things I like? And she was like, people don't do that, but I will. And it was like the best. And she gave me this ripped off piece of paper and it was like old school. And I loved it. It was what I wanted to do. It wasn't what the internet was showing me. And I pursued it slowly. And I guess that's kind of an example of your point, Kat, in a weird way of don't be afraid to take it down a notch. Take a break from social media. Don't feel that comparison and the pressure. Just do something that moves you. Like I just felt like doing that day and I did it and it felt great. So if you're running into someone who's into energy, just have a cup of coffee with them or simple, reach out, literally go email somebody that you find interesting. They might respond.
And I think something important to acknowledge is that I was told a lot like, oh, do X, Y, or Z thing. It's just go out and do it. And it is scary and it's hard to do. And there's stuff that can kind of add barriers, like women in STEM, the color of your skin. There's socioeconomic status, which I think is important to acknowledge. It's hard to do that. And there could be a lot of different reasons that it's hard to do that. Even so, it's knowing that the people that are doing these things, everyone's kind of feeling that you're not alone in that feeling is something scary. That for sure applies to high schoolers as well interested in STEM. I mean, there's so many different options and there's so many ways to go. Just knowing that everyone kind of went through those steps and there are people that feel what you're feeling and it's normal. And it's actually, I think it's important to go through those uncomfortable stages to actually be able to have the tools and the skills to succeed in the future. Something I'm still learning too. I mean, I don't even know what success is at this point. Still very young in my career, but yeah.
It's surrounding you so much you can't even recognize it, James. What you just said resonates with me too, because I, like I said, did this crazy thing and went off to Ireland and got this master's degree in Irish studies. Many years later, fast forwarding to having the conversation with Edsel Ford about the job at 1D, that's what he liked about me. It was different. It wasn't like I had been studying whatever it was that I needed to do for him all along. I had taken this very strange path, but it also adds to you as an individual, your experience, what you've done in your life. And you can't put a price on that. So the bottom line for me was I'm so glad I followed my passion to do that, because although I don't work in Irish studies or history or lecture or anything, it did bring me back to where I was supposed to be. And I think I'm a better person for it.
Absolutely. No one's asking me for advice for students, but I'm just adding this in here because I get it. And I'm a mom. And so I'm always looking out for my own kids too, as they're not quite to that point yet, but you kind of have to start young. As you talked about, Kat, you start noticing interest right away, right? And I think one of the things you can do is picture just anybody that seems better than you, or like they're successful, or I could never approach them. Picture them as your friend or your aunt or your uncle, or they were a kid once, even if they don't have kids of their own. Sometimes I'm like, I'll picture them as like a soccer dad. And then I approach them like that, like someone who I would talk to on the field at my kid's soccer game or something, right? It's completely different. You don't know who any of those people are, but they could literally be the president of that organization. They could be, we're all human, right? We have these connections. And I think when we can kind of break those scary barriers down and just look at each other as humans. And I think when you're vulnerable and brave, and it just takes a couple seconds to get through that very scary moment, it's like this breath of fresh air. People notice that. Like you said, Kat, people notice, hey, that was different. Because half the time, you know, the majority of the people are too afraid and they'll just be sitting on the sidelines. And if you're willing to just kind of take that extra step and just start a conversation, you don't know what doors that could open.
Something to add on there too. I don't want it to be like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps message there, but let this scary experience be motivated by an interest or a passion. It's not like you're trying to grind through this experience because it's what you're supposed to do. And even if you're not interested in it, and it's what makes money and what seems like the thing to do, I don't think that's the point. I don't think that's what any of us are trying to say at all. I think a lot of these scary experiences should be motivated by your interest in what you care about, even outside of a professional or workplace, just what you think about, what's itching at the back of your head. I mean, you guys would be able to attest to this more, but I think in my experience, at least, I think that's what creates the best work. I know every time I've worked on a project that I'm genuinely interested in compared to something I know I just kind of have to do, it produces much better results and something I'm actually proud of at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
James, I have a question. So I'm just curious because I have a high schooler right now, freshman fall, but I guess I'm wondering, because you said the grind, and I feel like it's the grind right now for him. And it's hard to even perceive of interest. It just feels like a lot. What would you say to students that are in that space right now where it's a long haul for 4 years of high school? It's hard to incorporate passion and interest. But what did that look like for you and what got you through that?
Yeah, it's tough putting myself back in those shoes because, I felt all those things. Just the unknown really is what it comes down to. Whatever path you choose, there's so many different experiences that can come out of that, and it's so scary. I think something that I knew, and maybe not just was told, but internalized, was it'll all work out. That kind of mentality of whatever happens, it'll all work out. You're going to be successful if you pursue what you're interested in. And again, that's something that you hear all the time, but still something that I'm trying to internalize now. I wish I really understood what that means from a younger age. And I guess the take-home message would be, as long as you're pursuing what you're interested in, just go with what your gut's feeling, what you feel is the best move. In the grand scheme of things, if you're motivated, if you're working hard, if you're doing all those things that everyone tells you to do, it'll for sure work out. You're going to be successful, you're going to be happy. So that's where your interests and what you care about are really important, in my opinion.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Still trying to follow it.
Aren't we all, though? I mean, we never stop. That's the thing about success. It's sometimes changing, right? And we're the only ones who can define that for ourselves. So someone's measure of success can be completely different to mine. And that's also very valuable as far as that whole comparison game that we kind of touched on. Pursue the things that you are drawn to and motivated to. There's a reason that you have that in you, right?
Yeah. And I think even outside of the workplace, outside of professional experiences, is just as important. I've been thinking a lot about what work-life balance means. I think your last podcast was about burnout specifically.
Yeah.
I think the key word of balance there is so crucial. So yes, let your interest in your professional career and your professional passions dictate what you're going to be involved with, but also just as importantly, go do the thing that you want to do that's a hobby or completely outside of work that has nothing to do with your professional experience. And I know in my, again, limited experience, that's where I come up with a lot of ideas or figure things out. And then you're not even thinking about them consciously. It's just kind of things click, and that balance is, although hard to maintain sometimes, especially when you're a high schooler applying to all these colleges, doing your normal coursework, allowing yourself to have that balance to pursue hobbies outside of your professional experience is so important as well.
Absolutely. So you have running. Anything else? What about you, Kat?
I do a lot of my greatest strategic planning swimming laps.
Ooh, I could see that. I feel like I've read somewhere that if your body is moving or your hands are busy, your mind gets freed up to actually process, because like you said, James, you're not actually thinking about all those things in your head, and you're focusing on whatever that is, the swimming laps or the running, and then it kind of frees that space.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I'd be able to add one more thing as well.
Yeah.
From a point earlier, I think if you're in a position kind of in general in your life that you enjoy, so say, for example, you really enjoy coding and you're working on a sustainability project with the software side of things and you really enjoy that, I think it's important to also kind of share that love and share that passion in whatever way you can, like a volunteer program, or even just, of a high school student who wants to get involved with it. Maybe putting the onus on the people that are in those kind of positions people strive for, and having them share that with others is something important. I think that it's coming more and more common, but yeah, just something I wanted to add.
I love that, passing the baton.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, James, because I was thinking myself about that and didn't want to put you on the spot because we hadn't talked about it previously, but that is part of the U of M Sustainability Fellowship requirement, is that you're doing your part to reach back to students who are coming up. I think that's so imperative. It pays dividends.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm. So I'm curious, because I've heard a lot of parents lately, because this is the season, that their kids are starting to put in their college applications. What do you think made you stand out? Because it's not just you've been getting great grades, right? You almost have to have this incredible resume just to get yourself to the next step. And how important is that, do you think, James?
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know the other side of it necessarily, but I think one thing that sticks out is kind of being genuine, true to yourself. I think I applied to, it was ungodly numbers, something like 17 different colleges or something. Yeah, it was insane. It was a mess, but I did well with it. I think it's because in my college, essay or whatever you're writing, maybe not having a story about that crazy volunteering experience that was so cool, or trying to kind of almost flex. I don't know. Am I allowed to say that? You don't want to be flexing in that. I think it's much more important to share a genuine experience, something that you enjoyed or care about, even if it's very simple, tying that to your character and whatever your favorite part of yourself is, and share who you are and not so much what you've done. I guess with the experience that I've talked to from other people in college, it seems like that was a common trend.
That's really good advice.
Really good. This is just basically an advice episode. So if you're listening, you might want to go back and re-listen, take some notes.
Take some notes, yeah.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to talk about or leave the audience with?
I guess one thing is, I know we talked before about the sustainability fellowship and the importance of STEM. I mentioned this briefly, but I guess this also applies to high schoolers going into college or even middle schoolers going to high school, anything. Not so much about the things that you learn. So in my example, like it wasn't so important that I was learning about biomechanics. It has nothing to do with sustainability. I think what's more important is the tools that you gather. So for example, like in that biomechanics lab, that's where I first learned how to use MATLAB, which is like a coding language. And that skill has been translated in quite literally everything that I've done since. So no matter where you are on your journey or whether it's your kid's journey or whatever, I think the more important thing is just in the STEM field in general, picking up as many tools as possible and trying new and different experiences, even if it doesn't really seem related in any way, because it has a lot of benefits. I think that also applies outside of STEM, like, I don't know, taking a philosophy class or taking an English class, because you never know what new perspective you're going to gather.
Absolutely. Well, and I think kind of bringing what you just said to something you mentioned earlier that I think is important for those who maybe U of M is not attainable for them, or one of these big colleges, or maybe even a community college is just not accessible right now. There are still a lot of available resources. I mean, I'm not an expert in this. I know you both have more experience, but I mean, even simply back to my library example, there you can learn quite a bit for free. I know if you don't have access to a computer at home, you can use theirs and do coding online. And if it's something that you are passionate about, it's worth pursuing, even if maybe you have to walk there or you ride your bike there, right? There's probably grants available and things like that. I don't know, Kat, if you have anything to speak to on that side of it, but.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess the first thing I say right off the bat is we have funded libraries around the country that do a couple different things. One, it used to be called Linda, and I think it was purchased by LinkedIn. And there's another one, Tutor.com. So a lot of libraries, to your point, will have those available. And if they're not, you should encourage your library to consider it. And then I guess the other point would be that not all jobs or even sustainable opportunities for making a living wage have to have a college degree. We talk about this a lot, particularly in the state of Michigan here, where there's a lot of great pilot programs happening to help students in the high school level understand not only their interests, but their skill level and their skill aspirations, if you will, and really walking them hand in hand with the parent to the place that they're really meant to be. I remember talking about this with all of our colleagues down in Fountain Inn at our Bosch Rexroth plant. There's so many amazing jobs available even at a company like Bosch that don't necessarily require the bachelor's degree. So yeah, I mean, I think we have to understand there's a huge spectrum of opportunity and then the commensurate skill level with each of those that you can't really count yourself out if bachelor's degree or master's degree is not in your future.
Yeah. When I started at Bosch, I was an intern. And then because I was paying for school myself, my goal was to work for a company that would help me pay for school. So I started as an intern, then I was a contractor, and then I got in non-exempt, and then they started paying for my tuition. So then I was able to finish my degree. And I mean, those are opportunities. You have to be willing to work hard for them and maybe take longer, but they are worth it. And we also know there is a huge trade gap, right? College is not necessarily the path for everyone. And I think that needs to be shouted from the mountain. That is not a bad thing. That is an awesome thing. If you know where you're going, it doesn't have to include college and you still have impact. It could be sustainable impact. It could be on the energy. We all have a different part to play.
Yeah. I would love to see more of us breaking down the barriers and the stigma around technical and community college. And there are people who take advantage of that. I remember a meeting when I first started at Bosch. I went to Skyline High School out in Ann Arbor, and I was talking to kids in the Project Lead the Way engineering class. And I talked to the sophomore student, and he had started his own business, and I can't recall what it was that his business was. But I said, what do you think your plans for college are? And he said, oh, Mrs. Owsley, I don't have time for a four-year college. I'm going to Washtenaw Community because I have to run my business. So there was one guy who had taken the long view that I thought was so impressive. And then a woman in Oakland County who went to community college, got her certification in auto tech and did auto tech in high school, which was kind of frowned upon. But her long view was she wanted to be able to market cars, but wanted to understand how they work. And then ended up getting her bachelor's eventually in marketing. And I think was hired in a very competitive job to work on the Camaro. And it was because she knew what was underneath the hood. But she had taken that long view and not necessarily worried about the stigma attached to auto, tech in high school or her community college experience. I just think those types of stories are so important to raise up for students, because who knows? And I think we see that a lot in Bosch too, where people went the apprentice route and then ended up in really, really strong executive level positions within the company. There's so many great stories.
There are. Well, you both have been amazing, and I really appreciate you sharing so much of yourselves and being very vulnerable and honest, because I think we're not doing anyone favors by sugarcoating anything or painting any type of beautiful picture that all comes together perfectly, but it does all come together at some point, right? And thank you so much for being here and taking your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Bosch Podcast. In case you missed our other episodes, now's your chance. Go back and take a listen.